Order. I call this meeting to order. This is the Standing Committee on Human Resources, and my name is Chris Palmer, the MLA for Kings West and the chair of this committee. Today, in addition to reviewing appointments to agencies, boards, and commissions, we will hear from witnesses regarding teacher workloads and impact on student achievement, and teacher recruitment, and retention. At this point, I'd like to ask everybody to please put your phones to silent mode or vibrate. And I would like to ask all committee members at this point to, we'll start on this side and go around the table, to please introduce themselves. So starting with Ms. Sheehy-Richard.
Good afternoon, or I don't even know when. It's usually morning. I'll try that again. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Melissa Sheehy-Richard. I'm the MLA for Hants West.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dave Ritzie, MLA for Truro, Bible Hill, Millbrook, and Salmon River.
Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Danielle Barkos, MLA for Chester St. Margaret's.
Good day, everyone. Nolan Young, I'm the MLA for Shelburne County.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susie Hanson. I'm the MLA for Halifax Needham.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Kendra Coombs, the MLA for Cape Breton Centre, Whitney Pier.
Good afternoon. I'm Braden Clark, MLA for Bedford South.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tony Ince from Cole Harbour, and welcome.
Thank you, everyone. And for the purpose of Hansard, I'd also like to recognize the presence of Legislative Counsel Gordon Hebb to my right and Legislative Committee Clerk Judy Kavanagh to my left. As per the normal HR protocol for meetings, we will do a bit of committee business before we go to our question and answer period. And we will ask our witnesses to indulge us while we just do a bit of appointments to boards and agencies here. So we'll move on to that in our committee business, and I would ask MLA Ritzie to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion for the Department of Advanced Education. I move that Stephen Wadden, Donnie Holland, Keith Mayer, Harman Singh, Denise Allen, and Randy Ibrahim be appointed members of the Cape Breton University Board of Governors.
So there's a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passed. MLA Ritzie.
My next motion for the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, I move that Vivek Sood and Susan Crocker be appointed to directors of the Art Gallery of Nova Scotia Board of Directors.
Motion on the floor. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? Motion passed. MLA Ritzie?
To make a motion for the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, I move that Mickey McDonald be appointed chair and member, and that Adam Fraser, Matthew Ryder, and Matthew Johnson be appointed members of the Nova Scotia Boxing Authority.
There's a motion on the floor at the table. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. MLA Ritzie.
I make a motion for the Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. I move that Ann Crossman be appointed member, public at large, and chair, that Wayne Hamilton, Hansel Cook, and Sandra Toos be appointed members recommended, and that Marcel Como be appointed member, public at large, of the Advisory Board of the Public Archives.
Motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passed. MLA Ritzie.
And my last one, a motion for the Department of Finance and Treasury Board. I move that Mark Boudreau be appointed Director of the Nova Scotia Liquor Commission.
Motion on the floor. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Sorry, Liquor Corporation.
MLA Ritzie.
Sorry. For the Department of Finance and Treasury Board, I move that Mark Boudreau be appointed Director of the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. We will move one piece of correspondence to our committee business before we begin our question and answer period with the witnesses this afternoon. And just correspondence received by Mr. Lutes in an email from last week to join our meeting today as a witness. And for the record, I will note that in response to a request last week from Mr. Lutes, President of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, committee members agreed by unanimous consent in an email poll to invite him to join the witnesses today. Okay, so welcome. And we'll put off any other committee business till after our question and answer period. So we will now move on to our topic this afternoon. Teacher workloads and impact on student achievement and teacher recruitment and retention. I'd like to welcome all of our witnesses this afternoon. Thank you for being here. And at this point, I will ask the members at the table to please introduce themselves, and then we'll ask you to do your opening statements after that. So we'll start with Mr. Boulter.
Hello, my name is Chris Boulter, and I'm the Executive Director of Education, Innovation, Programs and Services at the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Good afternoon. My name is Elwin LeRoux. I am the Associate Deputy Minister at the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Lenarczyk. I am a teacher and a member of Educators for Social Justice.
My name is Neaves, and I'm a teacher as well as a member of Educators for Social Justice.
And I'm Ryan Lutes, President of the Nova Scotia Teachers Union.
Thank you. Now, I see we have other members with us this afternoon, and my understanding is that they will be mentioned in opening statements. At this point, we will ask everybody if they'd like to give an opening statement. Please feel free, and we can begin with Mr. Boulter or Mr. LeRoux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to speak with you this afternoon. Before I begin, in addition to Dr. Boulter, I would like to introduce two other colleagues who join us this afternoon. Kim Matheson, our Executive Director of the Centre for Equity in Achievement and Wellbeing, and Jeremy Brown, the Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Education Common Services Bureau. Team members who join me today are very knowledgeable about our public school system. I'm very pleased to have them with me, especially given my short tenure in my current position. Has a great teacher made a difference in your life? I believe if we paused, we could spend an entire afternoon sharing incredible stories of how teachers positively impacted each of our lives. Teachers are important to students, to families, and indeed to our communities. Teachers help students read and wonder, discover and become. Teachers guide students to build skills and help systems build futures. In my experience, teaching is an incredibly challenging, thrilling, and rewarding career. Coach your children, neighbors, and friends to an incredible profession. Coach them to become a teacher. As sure as the rewards of this profession are, like with others, there are also current challenges, especially related to labor market supply and demand. Nova Scotia currently is benefiting from positive growth. We record annually student achievement on September 30th. This year, we registered 129,121 students in our public schools. That's a year-over-year increase of almost 4,000 students throughout our province. Correspondingly, we have more teachers in our province than ever before. Currently, we have approximately 10,000 teachers and 2,600 substitutes. This includes the over 400 new teachers who were hired for this school year. Although we have been successful in hiring more teachers for our schools, together with regions, the Conseil scolaire acadien provincial, and the Nova Scotia Education Common Services Bureau, we continue to work on recruiting and retaining teachers. We look forward to sharing the details this afternoon about our coordinated and multi-layered initiatives. These include establishing a teacher recruitment and retention working group, adding more than 1,000 inclusive education supports, programs, and positions to the public school system over the last 5 years, increasing the number of days retired teachers can substitute from 69.5 to 99.5, establishing and assuring a maximum size on the number of students in a classroom, and supporting the professional learning of teachers. Last year, we issued nearly 450 permits to allow qualifying university degree-holding members of our community to substitute in our schools. As of November 24th this year, we've already issued approximately 230 permits for this current school year. We've also begun work to connect with other provincial marketing campaigns to support teacher recruitment. These include campaigns with Tourism Nova Scotia, the Department of Labour, Skills and Immigration, and the Office of Healthcare Professionals Recruitment. The Department of Education and Early Childhood Development appreciates and values the important relationships we have with the Nova Scotia Teachers Union, the Public School Administrators Association of Nova Scotia Universities with Bachelor of Education programs, and other partners who help us champion the opportunities in Nova Scotia for careers in public education. Once again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. We very much look forward to your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. LeRoux. Mr. Lenarczyk, do you have comments?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. But we are actually sharing our opening statement as two members, so Megan goes first, and I will follow.
Okay. Ms. Neaves.
Thank you. We were very happy to hear that Ryan Lutes of the NSTU was just invited to speak to the committee as well, since he hears from the teachers around this province every day and can give a more comprehensive testimonial than we can. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. Paul and I will attempt to give a quick glimpse of some of the challenges that we as teachers are facing, although of course we can only really speak here for ourselves. We would like to start by acknowledging that teachers are by no means the only ones struggling. Healthcare workers, childcare workers, long-term care workers, people facing housing issues, etc., are all in crisis. But that does not take away from the fact that the problems that we are seeing in primary to 12 education are real. Our students or school support workers recently had to make the difficult decision to strike in 2 regions of this province. We recognize that these issues are all connected, and we are in solidarity with people in those sectors too. Education looks different from what it was 20 to 30 years ago, and teaching standards have improved in an effort towards a more equitable education for all of our youth. For example, Indigenous and Black students are owed reparations from our education system, and teachers hold the responsibility to close these historic gaps, as we should. We need smaller class sizes so we can truly know our learners and build on what they already know. We are much more aware of the diverse learners in our classrooms. Today, in addition to delivering quality lessons, we are planning for the success of students living with autism, Down syndrome, intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, ADHD, behavioral issues, etc., while communicating with parents, assessing and reporting along the way. When we improve learning conditions for these students, we improve learning conditions for all of our students. Staff shortages mean that teachers are forced to cover for absent colleagues during their prep time, and children end up losing the resources that were created to help them succeed due to the shortage of subs. Mental illness is at an all-time high among students, and we do not have enough school counselors to cope. Some schools are currently without any school counselor. We need more counselors, school counselors, immediately. One thing that we often hear teachers say is that we constantly have added things to our plates, and nothing is ever taken off. There is no extra prep time to be able to do all of the important things that we now understand teachers should be doing. Teachers are burnt out trying to fulfill all of the duties that are impossible without the time to do so. When we invest in education, we invest in improving all of the systems that govern our society, as we have the future in our hands.
Mr. Lenarczyk.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. I get to give a bit of an analogy for you. So imagine that teachers are pilots of planes. Okay, so in the 1970s, that's before my time even, and probably most people's in this room. So teachers were like flying planes, but they were very old planes. You know, the things that had been done the same way for 100 years, right? In the 1980s and the 1990s, that's getting a little closer to my time, at least as being a student, teachers were also the builders of planes as well as the pilots. Teachers in the 2000s were asked more, which is to design the planes and build the planes and pilot them. Teachers today are designers of planes and builders and pilots. We are also the ground crew, the ticket agents, flight attendants. Passengers have ever greater needs, from very simple to very complex. The demands of the airline, furthermore, are more and more complicated. And teachers have to deal with all this with some support, but really doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Oh, and the plane is on fire. And teachers yet are expected to, the pilots are expected to land the plane and not just get every passenger out safely, but also make sure that that passenger achieves to the best of their potential and that every passenger is able to do that equally. And that should be, as Megan said, as my colleague said, that should be the job of teachers, for sure. But when you have less time to do it, less time to get to know your passengers or your learners, it makes it more and more challenging. Now, Nova Scotia is not unique in terms of these challenges. However, it is my feeling, our feeling, as educators for social justice, that we are lagging behind our other jurisdictions in the way we're dealing with the problem, and I look forward to hearing more of the ideas from the department on how to fix some of these issues. But bottom line is, a lot of these numbers are great, but there's just not enough teachers in the system because teachers don't have enough time to do the work that we need to do. The increased burnout that my colleague mentioned means higher costs for RCEs for the province, lower achievement for students, and basically an inability to meet the very important and very lofty goals that the department, rightly, the high standards that the department sets. And then the amount of work that teachers have to do then discourages other people from joining the profession. And when there are fewer joining the profession, then the cycle repeats itself because there are not enough people in the system. Now, part of the problem is that, and when I'm talking about shortages of teachers, it's not just substitutes, although that's kind of a big issue that we're going to talk about now. So the problem with substitute teachers are many. The first is compensation. Okay, so a very quick survey of the Atlantic provinces alone shows that Nova Scotia teachers are the worst compensated in the provinces, in the 4 Atlantic provinces, and yet they are being relied on more and more heavily to prop up the system, which is suffering because teachers are suffering from burnout. But a bigger issue is benefits and job security for the subs. Fewer people choose this career because they see what the realities are while they're doing their subbing or their teaching internships, and then they say, I can't do this because even if I get a substitute job, when am I going to get a contract? How is that going to work? They cannot see a path to their chosen career because of the strange and antiquated hiring practices that Nova Scotia has and the difficulties there are in getting a contract. Now, there are lots of possible solutions to this, and again, I look forward to hearing from the department what the solutions are. Some of them are. We have a couple of ideas as well. Hiring substitutes on a contract to teach in a large school or at a family of schools would be a great idea because it would give them that contract and some benefits and security. Changing the hiring practices, improving compensation for substitutes, and finally, and the big one, bottom line, giving teachers more preparation time to get to know the needs in their classroom, to get to learn the new curriculum that is being introduced, and the other initiatives, which again, I am not questioning that they're all very important and noble goals, but they take time to develop and to develop the expertise within the existing teachers and new teachers coming in. Now, as my colleague said, Megan said at the beginning, we know this is not only teachers that are suffering right now in the civil service, but proper care for the education system needs to be part of the path to solving Nova Scotia's societal and systemic problems. From the acknowledgement of historic wrongs to segments of our population through culturally relevant pedagogy and providing quality, equitable education to all of our students, improving education is a clear way forward and can help resolve numerous systemic problems in our province. And I believe we all need to work together to make this happen. And I thank you for inviting us to speak here.
Thank you, Mr. Lenarczyk. Mr. Lutes, do you have some opening comments?
Absolutely. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I appreciate that from the committee. Firstly, I fundamentally believe that all of us, whether we're elected or appointed, whether our favorite color is blue, red, or orange, we want to strengthen and improve our public education system. I hope today's meeting can serve as the building block for that, and that we can move towards a more collaborative dialogue when it comes to ensuring our kids, teachers, and schools all get the supports they deserve. It's no secret that the past months and years have been challenging times in our schools. A perfect storm of population growth, coupled with a COVID pandemic and now the current respiratory illness increase, has only served to exacerbate a teaching shortage that has been building for nearly a decade. Similarly, the needs of students have become increasingly more complex, especially against the backdrop of rising inflation, which is having the greatest impact on our already marginalized communities. Tangible supports for our students have not increased to the same extent and have left unsustainable workloads for many teachers and schools. The teachers, guidance counselors, and specialists that belong to the NSTU are an extremely dedicated group, dedicated to their students and grateful to be back into the classrooms after 2 years of pandemic learning. However, the fact that cannot be denied is that this is not a return to normal. Too often, teachers are being asked to give up their already inadequate prep time due to a chronic shortage of qualified substitute teachers. As a result, teachers are finding it harder and harder to develop those rich learning experiences that leave a lasting impact on our kids. Without this time, teachers are struggling to make connections with home, provide timely feedback to students, and connect with other teaching colleagues to discuss how to best support our kids. Similarly, those in our system who support our most vulnerable students, our guidance counselors, our learning center and resource teachers, our student supports teachers, are more often than not filling in for colleagues instead of doing the job that they are needed to be doing to support those kids. In either of those situations, ultimately it's student learning and student support and teacher workload that is the casualty of our teacher shortage. While I commend the work of the EECD through the Recruitment and Retention Committee, and I look forward to hearing what Mr. LeRoux talked about, and the NSTU does participate in some of this work, there is more work to be done. The NSTU has proposed 2 key initial initiatives to help alleviate the teaching crisis in our schools. These steps, if taken by government, would show teachers that government understands that our schools are in crisis and would offer a glimmer of hope to teachers. First, and my colleagues have mentioned it up here, is that Nova Scotia's substitute teachers are amongst the lowest paid in the country. And as such, many young teachers are choosing to pursue different career paths, especially in today's economy. Keeping in mind that substitute teachers are our teachers' entry-level position. Most teachers come out of their BD and they will be substituting. The NSTU would like to see compensation for substitutes increased to become more competitive with other jurisdictions in Canada. Something that I hear often from substitute teachers is that they can't afford to be a substitute teacher. They want to be, it's where their heart is, it's what they dedicated their post-secondary education to, but they cannot afford it in today's economy. Secondly, we encourage the province to create a publicly available recruitment and retention plan to address the current shortage, both in the short and long term. While I acknowledge the efforts taking place within the department, a clear and transparent path forward that is created in collaboration with teachers, universities, communities, and families is needed to properly tackle the crisis in our schools. And this I think is extremely important, a true recruitment and retention plan must place a significant focus on improving teachers' working conditions, decreasing class sizes, increasing prep time, and increasing supports to our most vulnerable students. The fact is that we will never successfully encourage our young people to want to be teachers if their own teachers are struggling daily with the demands of the profession. Teachers' working conditions are students' learning conditions and must be prioritized by our system if teachers and students and schools are to thrive. Our children are the future of our province. Let's not allow the current crisis to deepen. Let's take steps now to ensure that no student or teacher falls unnecessarily through the cracks, which will only widen with our inaction. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to addressing any questions that you may have. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lutes. So we will now enter into our question and answer period. As per the protocol of this committee, we do it by show of hands. I'll look around. I'll get your attention, and I'll get you on a speaker's list, and we will allow for a quick follow-up as long as it's pertaining to the original question. It's not an opportunity for a second question, just so we know. And we have so many witnesses here today, and I think we'd like to hear from everybody, and allow for a lot of questions. If we can try to keep our answers to the people being addressed. I know there might be an opportunity or feeling to want to answer, everybody chime in on an answer, but if we could kind of keep it fairly organized with the person being addressed and ask the question, that would be great. Okay, so I will move on, and we'll stop questioning at 3:40 to allow for committee business and allow our witnesses to give a closing statement at that point in time. So I saw Mr. Young's hand first, and then I saw Mr. Clark's hand, then I saw Ms. Coombs, and then I saw Ms. Yeah, so I'll make my list, and we'll move forward from there. Mr. Young, you begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question would be for Mr. Brown, please. And it's, with the population on the rise, I'm just curious, what is Nova Scotia doing to recruit more teachers, and what initiatives may be in place to achieve this?
Thank you for the question. So it's my pleasure to be here today and explain some of the recruitment efforts that we're working on to help out with our teacher situation and our substitute.
Excuse me, Mr. Brown.
Yep. Yes.
I have to recognize you first before we speak. I apologize. Yeah. That's a reminder to us all that please wait before I recognize you before we speak for legislative TV. So, Mr. Brown.
Great. Thank you. So we've hired a lot of teachers in the last few years. Introductory of class caps, increasing population growth, teachers that we've hired out of the inclusive education funding has definitely created some strains that we're aware of on our substitute pool. I'd like to take you through some of the things that we're working on as a department and with our partners over the last couple of years and what we're looking at as we go forward. I think one of the first things to support our recruitment strategy was to look at our regulations and whether or not there was any barriers in our regulations that were going to prevent us from out-of-province recruitment. This was work that we did with the NSTU, and we did make some regulatory amendments in 2019 to support out-of-province teacher recruitment. In 2019, we amended the regulations to eliminate the issuance of what was called the Bridging Teacher Certificate. A Bridging Teacher Certificate was issued to applicants who met minimum criteria for certification in Nova Scotia and who held certification in another province other than Nova Scotia, but did not have the same amount of credit hours as what a Bachelor of Education student would earn in a Nova Scotia program. So they met a minimum threshold, but the threshold was not the same to the maximum, wasn't the same amount of credit hours as what a Nova Scotia grad would receive. So as a result, they received what we called a Bridging Teacher Certificate. The problem with the Bridging Teacher Certificate was in the Teachers Provincial Agreement, holders of a Bridging Teacher Certificate would be paid at one salary scale lower than what they would have received had they earned their teaching Bachelor of Education program in Nova Scotia. So we needed to amend this. Obviously, it caused problems when we were recruiting out of province when we couldn't guarantee the same salary that we would be issuing a teacher who graduated from a program in Nova Scotia. So when we changed this certificate, three things in essence happened. We had 1,850 teachers who were previously certified in Nova Scotia who had a Bridging Teacher Certificate. At that moment of change, they were all eligible for what is called an initial teacher certificate, which is our entry-level certificate in Nova Scotia that would be received by Nova Scotia applicants. In addition, on a go forward, any teachers who have completed their Bachelor of Education program in another province and territory in Nova Scotia would automatically earn minimally an initial teacher certificate, the same certificate that would be earned in Nova Scotia. and any internationally educated teachers who had a BTC would automatically be eligible for an initial teacher certificate. And we introduced another type of certificate called a conditional teacher certificate. They still get the salary bump, but there may be there may be additional qualifications that those teachers would have to earn over a 5-year period for full certification, permanent certification. We're obviously very proud of this change. It had an immediate impact with our ability to recruit out-of-province teachers. From this, our strategy could be built. In short, our strategy is really a collaborative approach to recruitment. So we established a substitute shortage working group with the NSTU in 2020. We also had HR directors from our RCs and CSEP on that group. And what we were doing with that group was to look at our substitute teacher shortage and look at better ways that we can address our shortage. We took a deep dive into the numbers there to see what was happening with our substitution pool, and a series of recommendations came out of that work. We also recognize that the way we've been recruiting in the past probably needs to be revamped. So in the winter of 2022, we formed a recruitment and retention working group with all of our RCs and CSEP are represented with HR folks. NSTU sits on that committee and PSN sits on that committee. And one of the things that we decided that needs to change is we need to market Nova Scotia. We got to market Nova Scotia as a great place to live, a great place to teach, and any other province initiatives, we would go as Nova Scotia and not an individual RC or CSEP. That's a pretty powerful message. We had members from the province and the NSTU standing side by side in those job fairs saying what a great place it is to live and work in Nova Scotia. That recruitment and retention working group continues through this year. We're going to continue with our outer province initiative and establish our Nova Scotia presence outside of in our outer province job fairs. And we're also looking to better understand common needs that we have outside of outer province recruitment. What are our hard to fill positions? What are some strategies that we can share, best practices that would help all of us? And we're also looking to really have a better understanding of our substitute teacher pool. There's a recurring theme that the substitute shortage working group recognized that year over year, regardless of the size of our substitute pool, there seems to be only a small percentage of teachers who are working a large amount of days. There's never been a real deep dive into understanding substitute behavior, substitute experiences, perceived substitute barriers that the substitutes are experiencing. So we want to hear from our subs. There's probably a lot of good ideas out there that we can learn from. So we're looking at, actually we're meeting next week to discuss what this probably a survey will look like to really hear from our subs and how we can support them. As Elwin mentioned in his opening statements, we're beginning to make connections with other provincial marketing campaigns. We've reached out to Atlantic Province and Special Education Authority, Department of Labor, Skills and Immigration, talked to their navigator services. We've reached out to the Office of Healthcare and Professionals Recruitment, and we're looking to leverage each other's resources, looking for synergies, looking for ways that we can work together. In the fall of 2022, this is also very new, we've teamed with the other Atlantic provinces who have experiencing similar situations with their substitution pool, challenges filling rural positions. We have common needs, and we're, again, looking for best practices that we can share in the Atlantic provinces. We also have put things in to address some of our immediate needs. So working with the NSTU, we increased the number of days a retired teacher can work from 69 and a half days to 99 and a half days. Those were amendments by within the teacher pension plan regulations. Last year, we also worked with the NSTU to issue Bachelor of Education students with that conditional teaching certificate that I spoke of a couple minutes ago, so that they could act as a substitute and receive a salary for days that they weren't in the practicum. We've also, over the last couple of years, it's become more common than it had been in the past, but to support our substitute pool, we've issued a number of permits to teach. Permits to teach are issued to individuals recommended by their RCs and CSAP. They have a bachelor's degree, and they're able to substitute teach in cases where a certified substitute can be found. So last year, the Office of Teacher Certification issued 450 permits to teach. This year, as of November 24th, they've issued 230. So as RCs continue to recommend people, the Office of Teacher Certification will continue to issue these permits. This has created an opportunity. Permits to teach to unqualified teachers may sound bad, but we've also worked with our Bachelor of Education programs to offer part-time off-campus cohorts in Nova Scotia. And what we're seeing in those cohorts are cases where people who have enjoyed their time in the classroom with a permit to teach have now want to pursue a career in education. These people are already situated and established in their communities. They're mature students, so that we've had a couple of part-time programs in the Western region and in Yarmouth. Now these teachers are permit holders, are now certified teachers working in those areas. We also support some unique initiatives. We're hearing that University of St. Anne is now partnering with a couple of programs in France where those teachers can come over from France, study at University of St. Anne, earn a Nova Scotia teacher certificate, and be able to hopefully stay in our province and work. Combined, this multi-layered approach that I've led you through, we've seen some positive impacts. So from 2006, also kind of leading to our substitute shortage likely, from 2006 to 2016, year over year, the Office of Teacher Certification issued a lesser amount of teacher certificates, year over year, for over that 11-year span. Since 2017, there has been an increased interest in teaching in Nova Scotia, and year over year, since 2017, we've issued more teacher certificates to people wanting to teach in Nova Scotia. That's our Nova Scotia Bachelor of Education grads. That's our labor mobility, so our teachers from other Canadian provinces. Removing that BTC has really had a positive impact there, and our internationally educated teachers. So over those 5 or 6 years, since 2016, we're up 44% increase of where we were in 2016 in issuing teacher certificates. The last thing I'll add is just to talk a little bit about recruitment or retention. When we worked with the substitute shortage working group, we around the table, anecdotally, we didn't perceive there to be a retention issue, so we left that kind of off to the side of our project. Since then, we've learned that since 2014-15 school year, we're only seeing a retirement average of 314 and a half teachers a year. That's a small amount considering we have 10,500 FTEs in our system. And we also has recently learned that the number of resignations that we've seen since over the last 5 years is also low. We're looking at 73 resignations out of the teaching profession. So these resignations could be people also who come to the department to work, go to the NSTU to work, they go to PSANS to work, or they go to work in another province as a teacher. But 73 teachers a year is what we're looking at leaving the system under resignation. That works out to like 0.7% of our FTE population. So I think we're seeing some very positive things. Like Mr. Lutes said, there's other things to do. There's lots of work to do. We're just really getting started with our new approach and really excited to see where we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. MLA Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to ask Mr. LeRoux, we've heard from several witnesses here today about the issues around compensation for substitute teachers. I wonder if the department is actively looking at or will raise these wages to keep them, as we've heard, competitive with at least the other Atlantic provinces. Thank you.
Mr. LeRoux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. The Nova Scotia Teachers Union and the Minister of Education have a provincial agreement, and that agreement includes salary, and it would be the minister's understanding that the agreement ends in July of next year, so we would expect the NSTU to be bringing forward any of its priorities in bargaining. But given that that is within the collective agreement, it's most likely that that would be an issue that would be brought forward through bargaining, collective bargaining.
MLA Clark for a follow-up.
So we wouldn't expect any change prior to July at least. Is that correct?
Mr. LeRoux.
My understanding at this moment that issues that are within a collective agreement would best be brought forward through bargaining. It's not our understanding that that would be an incredibly high leverage strategy to increase the efforts that Mr. Brown just referenced. Certainly is something that I can bring to the minister and discuss, but given its collective bargaining, we would expect that that would be where it would best be tabled. Thank you.
Thank you. MLA Coombs.
Thank you. And, you know, as someone who truly, truly respects the collective bargaining agreement, I think it's great. But I also find it, I'm just going to say this before I ask my question, I find it very concerning that in the preambles and the last answer that was given prior, that the government would not even have that as a possible consideration on their behalf to raise substitute pay as well as provide contracts and benefits, considering that is what's being consistently being told is the biggest issue to our teaching, keeping and retaining our teachers. And I would think that the department would be having that as one part of their solutions. But I see a pattern in all the departments. So my question, I'm going to go to our educators and STU, and I would like to ask them, given, compensation is an issue here, and it was mentioned that, providing subs with contracts as well as benefits is a way of retaining teachers, and we're seeing that teachers are leaving due to low pay, and we're also seeing that teachers can't get to that magic number of 3 contracts in order to get a full-time position, and we're seeing that a lack of subs means that the classrooms sometimes don't have a teacher. And so I'm wondering, with all those hurdles in finding substitute teachers, can you talk about this challenge and how it relates to the bigger issues that teachers are facing? And that is to both to our teachers here and to NSTU.
Mr. Lutes?
Thank you for the question. I'm happy to hear a lot of the initiatives that are coming out from the department in terms of teacher recruitment and retention. I mean, the NSTU does a lot of work with them, and so I don't want to. We have a collaborative relationship, and I think there's good things being done. What I think though is we are we need to get moving quicker, and we need to be doing some things today that show the teachers of this province that government is willing to work with them. And so the NST, I heard Mr. LeRoux's comments about substitute pay being part of the collective bargaining process. He's correct. The NSTU would be more than happy to discuss an increase of substitute pay outside of the bargaining process. That's something that we've heard from our substitute teachers. That's driving them out of education. That's something that we feel would have a positive impact on the profession, on our kids, on our schools, on our teachers. And so and also this is something that we have advocated with already to government. This government has shown willingness in other areas to act outside of the collective bargaining process when they feel the need. Our schools are in crisis every day because we do not have the right number of substitute teachers. They are being pulled from our most vulnerable kids. Our teachers are overworked because of it. It is a crisis. It's a crisis that requires government action, in my view, today. And the NSTU would be more than happy and willing to discuss that substitute pay outside of the collective bargaining process. I'm available at any time to talk about this issue.
Mr. Lenarczyk?
Thank you, Chair. If I may add, as a substitute teacher, so I moved to Nova Scotia in 2016 from New Brunswick, where I was teaching on a permanent contract for 16 years, or 15 years, and when I got here. 2016 was a bad year for Nova Scotia education and I didn't know that before I came. We came for a job for my wife. So anyway, long story. But, once things got resolved and in the second year that we lived here, I started looking for substitute teaching work. And in that year, it was very difficult to get sub jobs. Like there had to be I had to buy an app for my phone that would tell me if there was a job. And if I didn't grab it right away, I wouldn't work. So I went a different direction and I worked in private schools for a little while and then I came back to subbing. Today, I bet you if I went on that website right now, there are 20, 30 unfilled sub jobs just in HRCE. Those solutions that I mentioned earlier, I think, and I also appreciate the work that the department is putting forward, but I find it interesting that retention was left off to the side because subs are here and they would like contracts. I would love a contract. And it's just not working that way. So.
Ms. Neaves, but I will ask as we get questions going to try to limit our responses to one two at the very most, because we do have a lot of witnesses to speak. So, Ms. Neaves.
Yeah, so I just wanted to speak to the retention of teachers as well, and hence why we're actually needing more subs is, the burnout of teachers, right? We have so many things on our plate, and we're trying to provide an equitable education. And honestly, all of us have been trained through a Eurocentric system, right, to be a teacher. We've learned through that lens. So when we're trying to provide multiple perspectives in our classroom and make sure we're enriching the students' learning from all different angles, we need the prep time to be able to kind of almost unlearn everything we were taught, relearn, so then we can reteach. And so there's not a night that goes by that, I don't go home or any teacher goes home based on what I was feeling and hearing from other teachers that we carry a guilt of, I could have done that better, or, oh yeah, I forgot to do this, or I need to contact this person's parents, or there's always things on our list that we cannot complete at the end of our day, so it leaves us working on the weekends, working late nights, while a lot of teachers have their own families and things to tend to as well. So I think that, we have to also focus on the retention of teachers, and we need more prep time to be able to provide the equitable learning opportunities for all of our students in the province.
Thank you. Okay. I will limit the answer to one particular person this time, though. MLA Coombs?
Thank you. To Mr. Lutes, he has, in your discussion, you said that you're ready and willing outside the bargaining process, and I agree with you that government has been willing to go outside the bargaining process for certain topics. And so my question to you is, has the government and the department been receptive to talking with you about the pay for substitutes?
Mr. Lutes?
Thank you. I think right now the Nova Scotia Teachers Union has a collaborative relationship with the minister and with government. So they have been open to hearing our concerns. And they're at this point, that's as far as it has gone. So we've advocated for changes, and then kind of the line that's consistent is they're open to to fixing this in bargaining. And while I appreciate that, and that's I think substitutes have been long overdue for a pay raise, and so it gives me some hope that in our next round of collective bargaining we'll be able to achieve that for substitutes, because again, substitute teaching is teachers' first job. If we can't expect folks to go to school for 6 years of education to come out and make $32,000 or $35,000 a year. It's not unreasonable to ask that they should be paid a living wage. So I would say that's what they've opened themselves to. Again, I believe that there's some room where today we could make some tangible improvement for folks. Mr. Brown talked about a few things. One, trying to figure out why some substitutes maybe aren't working more days. Well, part of it is because sometimes it's not worth the money, and more compensation is going to entice substitutes to work more. That's part of it. The other part of, I believe, a strong recruitment and retention plan. And again, I'm really happy to hear the department talking about this more in depth. But if we have a recruitment and retention plan that completely leaves out the working conditions and learning conditions of our schools, teachers, and kids, then there's no point in writing the report. Teachers need to have jobs, like my colleague said, that they go home, they do everything they can, and they feel good about it. That's what they want, that's what they deserve, that's what our kids deserve. And right now in many schools, that's not happening. And again, it's not for a lack of trying, it's because teachers' plates are overfilling and students have more needs that aren't being met.
Thank you. MLA Barkos.
Thank you. Mr. Lutes, you said earlier and then again just now that you work with the government, you do some work with the government and you collaborate. And I just kind of want to know, can you give us some examples of how the government is engaging with NSTU, how you guys are working together, and teachers to better understand their needs?
Mr. Lutes.
Thank you. So certainly we have a lot of staff members that are on department committees that are bringing the NSTU perspective forward to the department. This is something, again, that's important for the NSTU. It's important to get teachers' voices on department committees. So that's certainly something that we value, teachers value, getting their voice heard. and like I said, we do have a collaborative relationship with government, and so I don't want to leave here thinking that no one is listening, because I do believe the department is listening. Where I think the buck is stopped is the action that teachers need to see to really think that change is coming, and I think that's a really important piece, is that right now all they've heard from us is that we have a collaborative relationship, that we're doing lots of work, but when they go to school, they're in the same school with the same conditions as they were yesterday. And I also recognize the education system large. It's hard to make changes, but teachers need to see some tangible changes now. And again, it's not always just about them. It's because what's really weighing heavily on their heart is that schools are not able to support our most vulnerable students because teachers are being pulled in so many directions.
Emily Barkos for a follow-up.
Yeah, I got a follow-up. Yeah, and I think it's a follow-up. Others might not. But we saw examples of NSTU and the government collaborating on issues throughout the pandemic, including teaching shortages. Are there any initiatives that you feel should be carried over or worth continuing, maybe, from last year?
MLA Lutes. Mr. Lutes. Promotion or demotion? I don't know.
Say the same thing.
Mr. Lutes.
So I mean, just again, to some of Mr. Brown's comments about the, increasing the number of days that retirees can sub, that's something that we brought, or that was brought forward and changed through the pension regulations, and so I think that's a tangible, positive thing for our system. But let's also be frank that that's also that's just a drop in the bucket, right? We can't prop up our education system, and we can't have all of our retirees who already had a career needing them to be substitutes. Substitutes is, again, an entry-level job into the profession. We want those, if we can, ideally, to be the new BED students, graduates, to be our new teachers, right? To get a foot in the door, to then get some successes in the profession, and then want to be in the profession. I think, so I caution this table and other tables to think that that's just one solution. That is a solution in the grand scheme of things, and certainly that's something that the NSTU supports. And we've heard positive comments from our retirees as well. So that's certainly one initiative that I think was very positive, and that the NSTU, I believe, will be looking at least continuing on.
Thank you, Mr. Lutes. MLA Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, first and foremost, I truly appreciate all of the work that is done at this table, whether it's department side, whether it's in classroom, and as well, supporting and protecting the teachers and the staff and admin. I know that it is not an easy job, but I do respect the fact that you're here to give us this information, because this is valuable for the work that we need to do when we sit in the House and discuss these issues. So I want to say that the report in 2015 conducted by NSTU that was published on teacher time use, which found that workload was a major stressor for teachers, and there were concerns reported about teacher well-being in the light of all of that, and we've heard that today from a lot of the conversations that were around the table. I want to know how the COVID-19 pandemic and the respiratory RSV and the flu, how has this impacted teacher workloads and related stress, and what supports are needed to support the well-being of teachers during this time, so that we don't replay this again in another season, because we know that we don't have enough teachers right now doing the work that they need to do because of sickness and stress, but as well we have shortages across the board. So I'm going to ask the teachers if they'd like to answer that.
Okay. Ms. Neaves?
So I can only speak to my experience, but we have been down. There was one day we were down 20% of our school due to sickness and illness this year. It's just a couple weeks ago I had 8 kids missing from one class, 10, I don't know the exact numbers for the other ones, but very high numbers. And so what happens is, I was wondering whether do I plan my original lesson, or do I wait till those kids return, and when are they going to return? So then I'm like, do I give them more busy work, or do I give them the lesson that I was really excited to deliver to them? And so in result, you have to make that decision, and then when they get back to school, usually we have other kids missing. So just trying to keep up, and then also provide some work for them, or things that can develop their skills, because because they're going to be missing mini lessons and different things like that. But the illness has played a huge factor in our schools, and I haven't, out of all my teaching years, I haven't seen so much on the rise. So it's affecting, and then in result, teachers are getting sick because we're getting those same illnesses, and then they're off, and then it alludes to a sub shortage, and it's kind of a continuing cycle, because then when we're getting better and returning to school, we're now don't have the prep time because we're covering for the teachers that are now out. And this has literally been happening all year long, and it's hard to get our prep time back because of the sub shortage.
Thank you. Okay. MLA Ince.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. My question is for the department. What incentives does the government have to retain new education graduates at our universities? If there are.
Is that directed to Miss?
Anybody at
Okay, Mr. LeRoux or Mr. Boulter? Who would like to take that question? Mr. Boulter.
So what I'd like to do is go through a few pieces related to the supports that we would provide new teachers as they enter the system. First and foremost, what I'd like to state is over the past several years, we put over 1,000 positions as part of our inclusive education policy into the system. So over 1,000 positions dispersed throughout the province. Those positions are all intended to support classroom teachers as they embark on inclusive education. And as our partners at the NSTU have stated, it's not easy work. It's tough work, and we certainly value the time and effort and everything that goes into that. So we're very enthused about where we are with inclusive education. We know again, as per some of our partners, comments today, that it's a challenging task, and what we want to do is ensure that there's supports in place so as new early career stage or new career stage teachers enter the profession, they're properly supported. So inclusive ed is one. For example, this year alone, there was over 150 positions, and again, over 1,000 positions budgeted. Those positions could look like things or roles such as student support workers, extra learning center teachers, extra teacher assistants, and a variety of other roles. Another piece that we're very excited about that's going to have a direct impact on new career stage teachers is a new coaching framework that we've just been implementing this year. So we know as teachers enter the profession, the support they receive in those first few formative years is extremely important. So within the new coaching framework, the expectation is that someone with an area of expertise goes into a classroom, doesn't just sit and observe, but engages with students, gets to understand the students with the classroom teacher, and co-teaches along with them. So that's something we've implemented as of this September, and something that we're quite excited about as well. In addition to that, as a result of the pandemic, but certainly not that it wasn't imagined before, we're really focusing on foundational outcomes. We know part of the workload that comes from teaching every day are the amount of outcomes that teachers are required to cover, regardless of grade level. Obviously, each grade level and each subject area would have its own grade level outcomes. So what we tried to do was to say, if we have this many outcomes, how do we boil those down to some foundational outcomes and ensure that when teachers look at an outcome document and say, here's what I'm required to cover this year, through my work with children in this classroom, that they're very clear, they're concise, and there's no more than are required. So that's some work that we've done. And when the pandemic started, we were in a transitional phase and talked about a year or two with foundational outcomes. And we have, clarified that the foundational outcomes now are the outcomes. So we hope that makes a difference as well as teachers look and say, okay, I had this many outcomes before. There is a more manageable amount of outcomes here. And the last thing I'll say related to that is we're doing a lot of work right now in mathematics in regards to pacing guides. So again, if you put yourself in the shoes of a beginning teacher, you have supports through inclusive ed, you have access to a new coaching framework. Teaching support teams is another thing right now, or initiative that came through inclusive ed funding, where teachers can go to a team at their school, and say, listen, I'm struggling. I need some help with this. So through Inclusive Ed, what we did do was create teaching support teams at every school. So we know lots of teachers throughout the province are using that as an opportunity to go to the team and request support. It's not an evaluation tool for teachers. It's an opportunity to partner with the school administration, with the school psychologists, speech-language pathologists, other experts that support the school and therefore can support the teacher. So, I mean, really what we're looking at is how do we wrap our arms around new and early career stage teachers to ensure they feel supported to do the very complex work that they do every day. Thank you.
Is there a follow-up, MLA? Okay. MLA Sheehy-Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I might have the question for Ms. Matheson at the back. I'm not sure, so I'll just go with it. I'm just curious to know a little bit more about the Provincial Student Success Survey that was administered in 2021-22. Let's give you a moment. Following a pause, of course, because of COVID-19's interference last year. But can you tell us a little bit more about the results of these surveys and how they might inform goals, strategies, measures as part of the student success planning, student successful planning?
Ms. Matheson.
Okay, thank you. I love talking about this, so thank you for the question. We have a student success survey that's done with students across the province from grades 4 to 12, and it really gives us an opportunity to hear directly from children about their experiences in school. We do that in the spring annually. We were disrupted a bit by COVID closures for a period of time, but we were able to do it this past spring. We do it in every regional center and CSAP, and this year we had great participation rate at approximately 75%. So our students really leaned in and gave us some feedback. We have reports at the provincial level, regional level, as well as every school receives a report, which is really important that they hear from the children in their schools so that they can then follow up with them, talk to them about what they're seeing, and they can inform next steps. Doing that with the children, talking to them about it. The way we do the survey is we disaggregate by many different groups, which is really important. So looking at how did our African Nova Scotian students respond to those questions? How did our Mi'kmaq Indigenous students respond to those questions? Are there differences? So we disaggregate by all of those particular subgroups. And we have it posted provincially, and we'd love for people to be using it and informing their work as they move forward. So how do we use it? Certainly, we pay attention to that information at a regional and school level. So they use that data to determine what they're going to do next for improvement. Every regional center and school has several goals they focus on, and that is mathematics, literacy, and well-being. So this survey really is associated with the well-being and the experiences of our children in schools. They use that to decide what are some action strategies that they're going to do, and then they measure the progress. So when the next survey comes out, when we hear from our students again, we can look at, has that made a difference? And throughout that process, we monitor, we reflect. It's really important to pause and see how things are going. And overall, how did we do on this survey? Overall, we saw some good responses from students. Their experiences are good in schools. We can look at and improve in some areas, and we are seeing some differences by particular populations. So that's something that we need to pay attention to and are planning moving forward. We're really happy to have been able to administer it this year, especially now with the pandemic, to see about what's happening, what their life is like at school. And we did, in terms of comparisons, so when we did the survey for the first time, we went out to the system, we asked students and teachers for any improvements that could be made with the survey. So as a result, some questions were changed. Some questions were added about racism and discrimination, for example. So we can't compare a lot. The survey's better now, but we don't have a lot of comparative data, but we will moving forward to be able to see improvements as we move forward.
MLA Sheehy-Richard, do you have a quick follow-up?
Thank you for that. The reason it piqued my interest is because I've got somebody in grade 12, and I was adamant that I was more engaged and adamant that he participates and fills out his. The only thing I just want to know was, did you find any differences between centers from the Annapolis Valley? So, for example, the AVRC as compared to the Halifax Center.
Oh, Ms. Matheson.
I'm sorry. Quick to respond. Okay, so when we look at the survey, there wasn't huge disparities from region to region. We're still digging into that data and talking about it collaboratively. In fact, there's a meeting today where they're working together to talk about that and what next steps that they're doing so they can support each other. But in general, not huge disparities between each regional center. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Matheson. So our list of speakers or questioners coming up is MLA Young, MLA Clark, MLA Hanson, and then MLA Barkos. So MLA Young.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll direct my question to Mr. LeRoux. We heard today, that there's been a shortage of substitute teachers and it may be causing disruptions or lower morale within the schools. Just wondering what efforts are being done to get more substitute teachers.
Mr. LeRoux.
Thank you for the question. Certainly, school regions are working hard to recruit. If you clicked on any of their websites today, I'm sure you would see banners that provide opportunity about employment. Even collectively with the NSTU, their senior leadership team meets with us, putting our comms folks together to do additional work in support of this. It's very important. I can assure everyone today, there is a teacher in every classroom. So our efforts to date have assured that learning is happening, and thanks to the quality of the staff that we have, I would say high quality learning is happening. At a school level, when systems are normal, everyone is there. When they're not, the principal will work with the team to figure out, first of all, do we need another sub? Because sometimes when staff are out, so too are students. So maybe I don't need another substitute. Most cases they would. And they would look to their team. How do I best use my team for the circumstances before me today? And when they need more on the team, they would reach out to regions and others to make sure that we maintain the goal of supporting children to have positive success in school every single day. I also want to let you know that one of the recruiting strategies includes permanent positions for substitute teachers. They do exist. Several regions have determined that is part of our solution forward. So they have permanent substitutes who, if for all intent and purpose, you can think of them as a teacher hired for the year, itinerant in a family, itinerant in a geographical area, or in some other designated area of need. So again, from school level problem solving to greater levels of team, regions continue to work to make sure that our schools are open and that children have the experiences that Ms. Matheson just reported about in schools. We do face pressure, and we will continue to work to solve that in collaboration with our partners, including all of you, that we represent Nova Scotia as a great place to come and work, especially in the public education system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeRoux. MLA Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to ask Mr. Lutes a question. And this discussion that we're having this afternoon in a lot of ways is reminding me about this recruitment and retention discussion we've had around healthcare, actually. And I've had the same questions kind of bouncing around in my head on that issue as well, which is kind of where we start, I guess, to make progress. So Mr. Lutes and others today, you've talked about the issue of time, right, and the lack thereof in many cases when it comes to teacher work. So my question, I guess, is the problem that there are not enough people either in the system or wanting to get into the system that are qualified to do the work, or are there enough people and we just happen to be losing them to other provinces, we happen to be losing them to other professions because, as others have said, it might not be the most attractive choice for someone right now. So I know the answer is always a little bit of both, but if you could kind of tip the scales one way or another, where do you think that would land? Thank you.
Mr. Lutes.
Sure. I mean, I think for us and what I hear from teachers is that, we're struggling to get folks to want to be teachers. right? That's the hardest of the problems to fix, right? That's not something that I could snap my fingers today and fix. It's something that I think our system has, our public education system, like healthcare, has eroded over the last 20 years because of needs and maybe some failure to invest or not investing in the right things. And I don't want to cast blame because I'm here to look forward. But I think if we want folks to want to be in the teaching profession, they should be able to talk to their teacher about it, and their teacher should be selling it up, saying, you know what, there are some challenges, but every day I go to work, happy to work with kids, and I give everything I got, and that's enough. And I think it's that last part. That's not enough today, right? Teachers are going home every day, giving of themselves, giving of their time, and knowing there's so many kids who didn't get the right supports. And that weighs on their mental health, which obviously has an impact on keeping those folks in classroom, but it weighs on the ability for new students to want to become teachers. Anecdotally, and I don't have any data to back this up, but one of the things that I've heard when I was teaching last year at Halifax West, but also just talking to some BED students, is that some of them, after their practicum, they've seen enough of the profession. And that hurts my heart, right? That's not as a teacher who got into this to work with kids, and then as a I worked my way in union leadership to support teachers. That kills me. That our newest, brightest, most passionate teachers are already seeing that the writing's on the wall, that they can't get through a career. And so to me, that's really telling. And again, hard problem to fix, but we're not going to fix it if a recruitment and retention plan doesn't talk about working conditions and learning conditions, right? If our plan is only about, bridging certificates and trying to get more subs, and all that stuff is important, if we're missing like at least half of the conversation. And so I think that's really important. We need to focus on what the teachers are telling us. Why are teachers struggling with coming to work? It's not because they are struggling because their mental health is degrading, because they can't meet the kids' needs, and that's a huge part of it. I would like to talk about some other things that other people said, if that's okay, Mr. Clark or Mr. Palmer.
If I could ask you to address it in your close, if you could, Mr. Lutes, because I would like to stay on track with our questions as the MLAs are asking them, and it just respects everybody around the table to ask their next question. So if you would like to put that in your close, that would be fine. Mr. Clark, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, quickly. Thank you. I guess to my earlier question, when we talk about recruitment, I think recruitment is easier to conceptualize and to act on, because it's, okay, we recruited 200 new teachers this year, but retention is the more complex and more difficult task for sure. So I wonder, and again, you may not have data to support this, and that's fine, but do you think as a province we are doing anything particularly wrong relative to our peer provinces, let's say in the region, on this issue of retention? Or is this a problem that you see, again, maybe you speak to your colleagues in other provinces, is this a consistent problem we're seeing across the country, or is there something we're doing perhaps not as well as we could? Thank you.
Mr. Lutes?
Certainly overall, this is a problem across the country. Are there some ways that I think that we could be doing better and then we can be out competing other places? Absolutely. And that's when I talk about the working conditions and the teaching conditions and ultimately student learning conditions. One of the things that I've heard from teachers is that throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, some of them had their prep time cut down. And it's stuff like that happens when teachers and students are experiencing the most need. We should be looking to uplift the system, not bring it down, or not bring aspects of it down. And so that's certainly part of it. We could be doing some aspects better, no question. And again, that's why I kind of listened with interest hearing Mr. LeRoux, Mr. Brown talk about the recruitment and retention stuff that is being done, because I think that's important. But I think if we only look at the recruitment and retainment without looking at the classroom conditions piece, then it's failing before it even gets out of the gate. I think that's the piece that we're missing. Right now, today, we have a teacher in every classroom. That's really important. Do we have a qualified teacher in every classroom? I think probably the answer to that is no. Do we have a body there or a permit to teach? And are there some opportunities there? Absolutely. But as a parent, when I send my kids to school, I expect them to be taught by a certified teacher with a Bachelor of Education degree. And if we've gotten to a place in our system where I can't, as a parent, expect that, then I think that is a description of a system that isn't keeping its bargain with parents and kids.
Thank you. MLA Hanson and then MLA Barkos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say that, listening and hearing that you're right. Getting into a profession or a career should be one that you love. And you see that every day when teachers are in the classroom. And they do love the work that they're doing, but there's also some added pressures onto that. And we feel it, we see it, we know, right? Like it's not hidden. This is not like just happening overnight. This is years and sometimes even decades of inadequate systems not doing the work that needs to be done. So I want to say, in the same report from 2015 conducted by the NSTU on teacher time, youth found teachers worked on average 10 hours a day, with 2.3 of those hours being outside of school hours. 20% of teachers reported working over 60 hours per week outside of their contracted hours. Workload was found to be the main stressor for teachers. My question to NSTU is, have these figures improved since this report?
Mr. Lutes.
Anecdotally, of course, I would say they have not improved, and likely they've actually gotten worse. One of the misconceptions, I think, is that school goes from 9 to 3 and then everyone's done, but that's not the case. It's teaching is a job, and it's part of the job, but it's a job where you have to work so that you can work. I have to prepare a lesson that I likely don't have enough preparation time for, and try to figure out how to meet all the kids' needs before actually going to work to teach and deliver that lesson. And I think that's a huge part of it is good teaching takes time. And it's not something, we're not, we run an educational system, we teachers want to deliver rich learning experiences. That can't be done when you are trying to maximize every minute a teacher has, right? So some of the parts that have come out of that is that teachers do need more time within the day, at their own discretion, so that they can plan their lessons, so that they can dialogue with the resource teacher about, geez, how can I really support Megan in the best way possible? Because you have a really good rapport with that student. Those are the conversations that non-teachers don't see. That's equally as important to the job as the delivering of the lessons. And what we're hearing from teachers is that because of lots of factors, because of decreasing prep time, because of increasing needs, because of plates that have become too full, is they simply, at the end of the day, don't have the time to do that. Not to mention, connecting with home, trying to fill in. I talk to elementary teachers often, and they often get reports from physicians to fill out to assess whether a student might have ADD or other issues, and they just that all goes into those hours of outside of the instructional day that they're working. But again, it's the teachers are working much longer than the 9 to 3, and it's because it takes work to teach, and it takes good teaching, and good education takes time, and we need to invest in our teachers, because I've always believed if you look after the teachers will look after the kids.
MLA Hanson for a follow-up.
Yes. And so, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question would be to the teacher sitting at the table: do you often find yourself working over the hours of the contracted work that you have?
Ms. Neaves.
Absolutely. There's no way you could not do that. It would be impossible to keep your job or retain your job without working outside the hours. And, my best part of my day is being in front of the kids and teaching. But in order for that to go well, or for me to feel like I'm doing a good job, I need to be home at night preparing my lessons, learning about each student, reading TINET documents, making sure I'm adapting for everybody in the classroom, because we have such a diverse classroom. And so, the same lesson is going to be delivered in different ways, and the way that they're assessed is going to be in different ways in order for them to be successful. So in order to plan for our diverse classrooms in a way that is also examining our own biases, and also, being reflective teachers is what, makes us a good one. It does require many hours outside of our contracted time.
Thank you. MLA Barkos.
Dr. Boulter, I think I'm saying that right. Yeah, okay. Can you tell me about the changes in the educational curriculum that support student success and the professional development and resources available for teachers teaching this curriculum?
Dr. Boulter.
Thank you for your question, and it provides a bridge, I think, from the last response from our partners at the NSTU. So we've certainly done a refocusing of the pedagogy or the instructional approach behind many subject areas. So there are subject-specific approaches, and then there are more general approaches that we would really, encourage and support teachers in using, regardless of their area, of expertise in the subjects they're teaching. So you've heard the term culturally relevant pedagogy that came up a little bit earlier. Certainly, culturally relevant pedagogy or culturally responsive instruction is an approach by which the student is at the center, and you get to know students as has been described, and you really focus on responsive teaching and ensuring that you understand the needs of individual learners and that the next steps of instruction are greatly impacted by your understanding of individual student need. Another approach that we certainly support and provide professional learning on is universal design for learning, often referred to as UDL. And within UDL, the whole approach is that if you design something universally, right away you've included everyone within the approach. So some elements of a universal design for learning approach, regardless of the grade level and subject area that you teach, involve ensuring that students have multiple means of expressing themselves. So the curriculum outcome may be specifically related to, an area of knowledge, but how I express that and how other folks in the classroom express it can be very different. So rather than providing these rigid constraints around what knowledge looks like, within a universal design for learning approach, there's multiple means of representation, multiple means of expression, and multiple means of engagement. So in other words, students bring their own interest, their own background to the classroom, and regardless of the subject area or grade level, we would want teachers to design lessons that allow for that diversity in terms of how they wish to express themselves and in terms of their students' own background knowledge. So those are two what I would call pedagogical or instructional approaches that are really important. And I think within classrooms where there's a diverse range of learners and a diverse range of needs, the more opportunity that students have through how the teacher chooses to instruct to represent their knowledge in ways that are meaningful for them, the more included they would be. And in addition to that, I'd like to think that that's going to help with all kinds of classroom-related matters, including, how a classroom is structured, including having or how you would deal with behavioral needs and just generally how you support students within a classroom. So within that, there's a variety of ways in which professional learning is applied and implemented. We're so thankful, for NSTU members who participate in Summer Learning Academy. We know lots of teachers take time during the summer to engage in professional learning. I attended a number of sessions myself last summer. The planning is done in partnership with the NSTU and PSANS as well, and we're very thankful for the time teachers put into that. In addition to that, there are a number of days throughout the year that are dedicated to professional learning that happen on sites. There is a provincial conference day that just happened in October, and we know that the NSTU and other organizations such as PSANS organize and implement all kinds of professional learning around a number of subject areas and put a lot of extra time into that. So we're very appreciative about that as well. So there really are a variety of means by which professional learning can take place. We know that up to 2 staff meetings a month can take place, and it's very common for schools to use one of those 2 staff meetings a month, at least, to provide professional learning around different subject areas. In addition, the other thing I would mention is going back to the coaching framework. So in addition to having dedicated time outside of the instructional day to offer professional learning, we also really want to stress the coaching framework and the benefits that can have of really embedding that professional learning right into the classroom practice. Thank you.
Is there a follow-up, Emily Burgos?
And yeah, I know what my son, actually, my 12-year-old son has half-day Wednesday, no school Friday for that. So speaking of student success, I'm just wondering, can you tell us about how the department is working with the NSTU to increase opportunities for students to have more physical activity, because that is part of their success and is needed for children. As a mother of 3, I think I understand that quite well. Yeah.
Dr. Boulter?
Thank you so much for the follow-up question, and I certainly agree that physical activity leads to better engagement for all students. And we know that through physical activity and through structuring lessons in that way, it also helps with classroom management. It's very difficult for adults to sit for long periods of time and to be passive learners, and obviously that's the same for students as well. So I'm really excited to share with you that we're very close to implementing our physical activity framework. So this is something that is, it's mentioned within the education mandate. It's something we've put a lot of work into. And one pillar of the physical activity framework is how movement is embedded in every classroom. So this is not saying students have X number of minutes of physical education during the week. That's already there. We already have that piece covered. But what we really want to look at is how teachers design lessons and how we support teachers in designing lessons in ways that provide more and more opportunities for kids to get active, to get engaged, and to move throughout the lesson, regardless of the grade level, and again, regardless of the subject area. So that could involve, I mentioned universal design for learning earlier. Students could express certain curriculum outcomes through movement and through experiential learning opportunities that are hands-on. In addition to that, starting last year, every school receives a Healthy Living Grant of $5,000 plus $1 per student. We know schools have used those funds in all kinds of great ways in related to getting students outside and moving. We certainly have a big focus on treaty education and land-based learning. We're currently developing a new high school course called Netigalimp 11, and Netigalimp is a term that involves two-eyed seeing and melding Western understandings of science with Indigenous understandings of science. That will be a land-based course that's really focused on environmental stewardship, getting out on the land, doing experiments, doing measurements, and we're really excited about that. We are planning on piloting that next fall. So that's a great example of integrating movement into a senior high, very subject-specific course. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boulter. Next on my list was MLA Coombs, but she's graciously passed her question over to MLA Hansen. So MLA Hansen, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was so complicated. Okay, so I want to say that a campaign promise of this government was to implement all recommendations of the 2018 Inclusion Report. This time last year, an interim update was published, and we know that there's been a lot going on since 2018. But I do want to say that since this last year's report was published, as the spokesperson for education, I received a number of phone calls and messages. And just last week, I received a few messages that said that teachers were pulled 3 days last week to fill in for classroom teachers because there was no sub, and therefore they weren't able to teach their program. Learning support teachers in elementary school are filling in, and their students are not getting the programming that they need. Another message was, in terms of how this affects their work, they didn't get the schedule from Resource, and they didn't know what students they were supporting. And I understand this is dependent on their school and areas, but I just wanted to just kind of bring it to light that, it's because they were pulled to go to classes to fill in for teachers who were off sick. And filling in for those teachers, they had to go to other meetings. There was things that they had to do. So teachers were filling in and stepping in places and adapting in order for the school to run in the way that it needs to run. And there is every teacher in a classroom. There is absolutely someone in the classroom to make sure that these kids are in a space safely. My concern is because there have been a number of reports about literacy and some on mathematics and our main concern, and I understand this as teachers, your main concern is for the teachers, the students to be successful. And that is key to their learning piece when they're in the classroom. And having all of these things jarred up and things happening really takes away from that. So I wanted to, and I want to say, like, does this seem like something familiar to you as teachers? And I'm seeing some nods. But I also want to say, what is the NSTU's thoughts about the slow implementation of the inclusion report, and how do you feel about this, Mr. Lutes?
Mr. Lutes?
Thank you. Certainly the teacher shortage that's manifesting itself in its substitute shortage right now is absolutely having, I would say, the most effects on our inclusive education model. Our student support teachers, our resource teachers, our guidance counselors, and just regular classroom teachers who maybe would be using their marking and prep time to support to support inclusivity in their classroom, are all being pulled from that time to once again ensure that there's a teacher in front of the classroom. And so when one of the frustrations teachers express to me is that, there's all these great ideas that are coming out of the department, and there are ways that we need to move. Mr. Boulter talks about, culturally relevant pedagogy, which teachers believe in, right? We believe in making connections with kids, informing our practice based on the students that are in front of us. Listening to what students are telling me in terms of what assessments they take and how they're doing, and then me taking that information and molding my next set of lessons to really delve into those kids in front of me. You can't do that when your school is metaphorically on fire and you're constantly trying to fill in the gaps. And that's what's happening is that, when we talk about things like moving on treaty education or anti-Black racism or all of the things that, again, the teaching profession really wants to move on. It's near and dear to our hearts. But when you're asking us to make massive pedagogical shifts, which we need to be making, but again, my focus is just making sure that I'm holding it together as a classroom teacher. I can't do that. I can't make big shifts in my pedagogy. I can't implement the things that our kids deserve because I don't have the time and my students aren't supported to the degree that they should be. And that's, again, that weighs heavily on teachers. One of the concerns we're hearing a lot from our learning center teachers is that because of shortages in EPAs or EAs, depending on how they're termed across the province, they're not doing their learning center teaching work. They're being EAs for the day, or they're being EPAs for the day. And again, are the kids, are they safe? Most of the time. Sometimes, they would tell me that they're not safe, or that there's moments where safety is an issue. But again, what are we losing? What expertise and services to kids are we losing when these folks are being pulled in all of these different directions? And I would argue that our schools, when everything's going well, schools are excellent, wonderful places where kids are learning and teachers are doing beautiful things in their classroom to support kids every day. But when schools aren't working, and they're not right now, asking teachers to try to expand their curriculum or change things is just a really difficult ask. And again, it's not that teachers don't want to. In their heart, they want to, but they just can't do it because there's so many gaps that they're trying to fill.
MLA Hanson for follow-up.
Follow-up would be, this also brings you back to when we think about assessments and other work that actually needs to be done that's beneficial for each student, is like, it makes me think about time preparation for IPPs. We know that we need to make sure that all of the kids are learning in the way that they need to, and how does that affect those types of assessments or those types of pieces moving forward? I mean, I want to direct it to the department.
I'll ask, yes, sorry. So I'd like to ask one of the teachers to respond to that, please.
Okay.
Ms. Neaves, sorry.
Just learn the ropes. So essentially, like I was talking about before, when we lose our prep time due to and have to cover for other people, when we are, like, I'm actually enrolled in my cultural relevant pedagogy master's right now, so I'm really working hard to implement that every day. But it does take time, and it takes time to really reflect on your learners and what they tell you and how to plan their lessons in a way that's going to support their learning and build on what they already know and what they bring to the table. But as far as our IPPs go as well, that takes a lot of work in itself, because not only are we just planning a lesson or an assessment for, our large group of sometimes up to 30 students in the classroom, but we have specific individual IPP outcomes that are to build on the students what they know already. But we need to also build assessments and plan for assessments that they can be successful in, or challenge them in ways that enhance their learning, that not only do we have to plan that, record it in TINET, create the outcomes for the student and reflect on what they are successful and what they aren't, but also report on that, as well as incorporating adaptations for our different learners in the classroom, which the majority, we have a lot of students that have specific adaptations, but also create adaptations. So the next teacher knows, what that student needs to be successful based on what worked for us. So again, it just comes back to the time, and if we're left without time, then it is our most marginalized, it is our most vulnerable students that are impacted every day.
Thank you, Ms. Neaves. I have MLA Ince and then MLA Sheehy Richard with about 5 minutes left. So, MLA.
Given the current situation and all the challenges, I'm going to ask this question, which is going to add another layer. According to the Narrative Research Poll, in 2022, 27% of students surveyed faced discrimination, homophobia, racism, transphobia. 60% of students surveyed had witnessed racism, discrimination, homophobia, transphobia. These numbers are unacceptable, especially when more than half of the respondents have witnessed discrimination in some form. With those staggering numbers, and this question will go to the department, what immediate steps is the department taking to ensure that students don't face these levels of discrimination?
Mr. LeRoux.
Mr. Chair, I know my colleague Dr. Boulter will be interested to share some comments, but MLA, racism is not okay in our schools. Neither is homophobia, neither is any other situation that excludes kids. That's first and foremost. And as a community of both employees and of families, we have to help our children to understand if something's happening, report it. We have to help them understand where to report it, to their teacher, to their principal, because the best chance we have at educating and of eliminating is to actually let people know what's happening. I know that our regional centers for education and the CSAP work very hard, but there's also work that's yet to be done. And I know that whenever someone is involved in an issue that relates to racism or discrimination, it's taken incredibly seriously. It's dealt with through the Regional Code of Conduct. There are usually consequences, but our industry exists to teach. So beyond consequences, we have to restore relationships and help people understand it's never okay. I will share with you one experience recently that I've had as senior leadership at the department. We meet with regional executive directors and the superintendent of CSAP monthly. And we've talked with regions, and one has presented how they work with community differently so that community can report and understand how best to do that in relationship with schools and central office. So we saw that as a common experience that we should be all looking to differently. And most powerfully recently, we shared an experience from Horton High School where the regional executive director invited staff to come forward and explain how they dealt with it. Students at the school said, when racism happens, students go home, they come back, and it continues. That's not okay. And they said, we have a better way. Let us teach. Let us show them how we experience that when a peer makes a mistake. So their entire approach to dealing with racism in school was educational, somewhat punitive in that there was an in-school suspension or other, but that time wasn't spent with someone home. That time was spent in a learning environment, including restorative circle with kids who were harmed. And they shared that model. I almost get choked up talking about it because the whole room was enamored with, there are better ways. Kids can help us with this. And everyone said all of our high schools could be doing that. So those are those are two quick examples in the interest of time, and I really appreciate you highlighting the issue. Thank you.
MLA Richard, with about a minute to go.
Thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting that we were kind of following up on my question because my hand scratching didn't compare notes over here with my colleague. But when we talk about the inclusiveness for students, teachers, and families through enhanced programming, et cetera, for student success, were there additional supports put in place for this? And could you provide us with an update? You have like 30 seconds.
Dr. Boulter.
Thank you for your question. There certainly were. So, as I mentioned earlier, there were over 1,000 dedicated inclusive education positions. Many of those positions were related to direct support for students in schools, including a number of student support worker positions. The other thing I would mention is we have established in both an African Nova Scotian and treaty education framework. So those frameworks, very similar to UDL, are not specific to one course or one grade level. These are frameworks as we build new curriculum and as we create new resources that permeate every course. So as we look at what are appropriate new resources for a course, or we look at developing and building a new course, first and foremost and right at the front of the conversation are those frameworks, in regards to, ensuring that new resources include elements of our African Nova Scotian Learners Framework, of our treaty education framework. So no new resource, no new course construction or anything like that would happen without those frameworks at the forefront of those conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Boulter. So that concludes our question and answer period. A wonderful discussion this afternoon, and we'll now allow our guests to leave us with some closing comments. Our committee does have a bit of committee business to attend to, so we could ask maybe we'll go in reverse order this time, and we'll ask Mr. Lutes to begin if he has any closing statements, and then we'll go across the table. Mr. Lutes.
Sure. Thank you for this, and it's been an excellent conversation. I do want to leave you with the words from teachers, because ultimately, I represent teachers, but there's no better spokesperson, for the NSTU than our own members. And so this is something that came in from a teacher that kind of, I think, highlights the extent to which the crisis is impacting them and their schools. And so if you'll indulge me for a second, and this is right from them, this isn't edited, this is directly from the horse's mouth. I've been sick with the flu for nearly 2 weeks. In a working system, one consistent sub would be available to take over my class with minimal disruption in the day-to-day flow for the students. But in our broken system, teachers are being pulled from their precious prep time to cover for me and the many others who are currently sick at home. There is zero consistency in the classroom, and my colleagues are stretched past their breaking point. As soon as I get back, the same will go for me. I'm planning already to not have any prep time, which means that all the work that is piled up in my absence will sit on my desk unmarked for however long, and the kids will be stuck with half-baked lessons from a teacher trying to hold it together. We're sick with viruses, and we're broken under the weight of an untenable workload. I can't wait to see my students when I get back. They're wonderful and hilarious and unique and full of so much potential. But no matter how much skill, effort, and love I put into my work, they're getting nowhere near the attention they deserve. So those, I hope that you're able to hear the hope that teachers have, the love that they have for their kids, and the admiration that they have for the system. They are here because they want to make a difference, but they're not superheroes, and they are begging for your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lutes. Ms. Neaves or Mr. Lenarczyk, do you have any closing comments? Mr. Lenarczyk.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody, again, for having us in here to speak to you, and thanks to all the other witnesses as well. I kind of struggled with what to say for closing, but I think I'll just leave it at this. You've heard so much about the workload and more being piled onto the teacher plates with the analogy of flying the plane and all that, and then the direct stories. I think the the thing to have happen is to take some things off that plate. All the important things that we've been talking about, the culturally relevant pedagogy, the individual, the universal design for learning, all those new things, they're wonderful and they're important and they are what teachers want to do. It's what our kids deserve. It's what we want to do in the classrooms. But we can't do all of that and all the other stuff. Last year it was the year before, I think. Yeah, the year before last. I had an experience at the year-end staff meeting where a veteran teacher like myself, actually probably longer in the system, when we were told that teachers in HRC were going to be teaching what they call 7 of 8 periods because of contract reasons. Anyway, less prep time at a high school. And we were told by administration that, just do that one more thing. And this veteran teacher said, no, I can't. I cannot do one more thing because I do. And she is a dedicated professional who gives everything to the students in front of her. And for us to be able to do that, for teachers to be able to give all of themselves, something has to give, something has to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lenarczyk. Mr. LeRoux or Dr. Boulter, closing comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of the department team, I just say thank you very much for your questions this afternoon. We appreciate you taking the time to speak to such an important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, one and all, for appearing before our committee today. And we do have some business to attend to as a committee, so we'll take a 5-minute recess, and we'll allow the guests to leave, and then we'll reconvene. Order. Thank you. We'll ask all committee members to come to their chairs. So we are in the committee business outside of what we did before the meeting began. Is there any other committee business? That's the question I would like to ask. Okay, so if there is no other committee business, I'll announce that our next meeting is on December the 13th. Note the change, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. What did I say? November, yeah, December 13th. Yeah, okay. Sorry. December 13th. I thought I said something wrong there. December 13th, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. This will give staff time to make any changes they need to make for the Health Committee meeting. This comes after that. The topic will be, our guests will be from the Department of Labour, Skills and Immigration, including immigration and population growth staff, and YMCA's Y-Reach program, support connecting newcomers to the workforce. So, with no other business on the table, I will now call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.